My name is Carissa, and I'm obsessed with books, and I've noticed an interesting trend lately. I've been reading a lot of fantasy books, and most of them are fantasy romance, and the boys are following a template, right? I decided to take some time and think through why are these book boyfriends following the same template, and why is it so compelling? Why do I want them to follow this template?
It's mindless cookie-cutter entertainment for wish fulfillment nobody.
Throughout this video, I'm going to be using Rysand from A Court of Thorns and Roses as the template, so if you haven't read it, there are some minor spoilers. Part 1. Depressed Goblin Nightmare Boy History. Since Rysand's rise, we've seen a new wave of fantasy romance readers looking for the same ingredients with different packaging. Think about these books right here. They all get recommended for a reason. And this isn't a new trend. We see this happen all the time where a new popular fantasy or paranormal romance book comes out, like this one, and there's a whole bunch of other books that flood the market to fill the gap. We saw a huge rise in vampire romances after Twilight came out.
This is the skin of a killer, Bill.
So that in itself isn't that interesting. If you aren't familiar with the story, the main character, Feyre, falls in love over the course of a series of events with Tamlin. And throughout that book, you as a reader are rooting for Tamlin and Feyre, or you're supposed to. And really, Tamlin follows a same trope, but different guy. He's protective, he's slightly disgruntled, he's a dark and mysterious past, he's oddly violent, and most importantly, he's powerful. The important part of all that is that he is soft and kind towards the main character, Feyre, so that you have that contrast there, and that's part of what makes his disgruntledness so compelling, or the template for this character. Let's be clear, J Maas did not come up with that. We have been following that same template for male characters since Mr. Darcy.
So this is your opinion of me. Thank you for explaining so fully.
But what is interesting about it is that Tamlin isn't the end game here. And that's where it gets interesting, because the reader is rooting for their happily ever after. We want them to be together. A Court of Thorns and Roses was published back in 2015, but we didn't really see it hit the main stage until 2020 or 2021. Or at least I didn't. There's a few practical reasons. People had a lot more time on their hands in 2020. There was also a cover redesign that really helped. And the genre new adult fiction didn't really rise until popularity then either. Culturally though, 2020 and 2021 was the perfect time for a narrative switch. It was our moms and English teachers who fell for Tamlin, that archetype. Someone who's just soft enough for you, but still strong and protective. And us as a new generation, we got swept off of our feet too, until something better was offered to meet the current needs of this generation. Part 2. The why. We all remember the crap show of 2020, but that had been really building since 2017 up until now. There's a generation of new adults who are no longer content to sit aside and be taken care of. We realize that a partner who's willing to protect us at the cost of our voice is violence, which is what Tamlin was doing. Enter Rysand.
Tall, dark, exquisitely dressed.
He still fits the prototype important marks. What J Maas does is infuse him with the characteristics that these other archetypes were missing. Emotional intelligence and a desire to empower Feyre, even at the cost of his own wellness. So we see now this cultural pendulum has swung from this crazy protective, I will murder you if you try to hurt yourself, to this, I will kill myself to make sure you're okay. Rysand's prime motivation throughout the series is Feyre's own empowerment and her happiness. And almost to an annoying point, he makes everything her choice no matter what. He makes a point to put her in positions of power where she has the upper hand and can exercise her own individuality, and also empowers her to exercise her own physical and magical powers. He wants her to choose everything and gives her all the resources to do so. Rysand understands the nuances of Feyre's moods and can literally read her mind. He passionately defends the people he knows and loves deeply while still treating himself like trash. You get the impression that he's the type of guy that would cut off his arm if it would make Feyre happy, and give a really long monologue about her happiness is the most important thing, and that he would learn to live without a limb because what's an arm really? Instead of broody, toxic masculinity, we get a palatable codependency. And that feels better because he empowers her instead of dominates her. But it's the same issue. The definition of codependent is codependency can be defined as any relationship in which two people become so invested in each other that they can't function independently anymore. Your mood, happiness, and identity are defined by the other person. That is a template! And if you're ready to jump to his defense, just remember, they literally made a pact that if one of them dies, the other person would die. Codependent. Part 3. So what? What does this say about our cultural moment? That these are the types of men that women are flocking to and obsessed with in these romance books. Does it mean that we desire for someone to love us so deeply that they'd be willing to harm themselves? I think it more speaks to a deficit in our culture. Because most people don't actually want a relationship like that. They would feel stifled. And really, there is no such thing as someone with incredible emotional intelligence who is that blindly codependent. We have to take a closer look at what needs are being met in the narrative that aren't being met in our reality. First, Rysand is obsessed with consent. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but most women fantasize about where even her own thoughts are hers to give away. Feyre is given an opportunity to opt out of every opportunity Rysand presents to her, things from elaborate heists to being walked home. And this leads to the second. Feyre always has the option of how to lead her life. And this is contrasted with Tamlin's absolute control of her, of locking her in the house, saying she can or can't do things. And unfortunately, this still feels like a fantasy for a lot of women and having choice over things like her own body. Third, Rysand's emotional intelligence and capacity for vulnerability is literally fictional. He knows just the right moments to open up and how to anticipate each thing Feyre might need from him. And this is compounded with him being able to maintain healthy, long-lasting relationships within his court that are thriving. Women are often tasked to be the emotional educator and vulnerability leader in their relationships, and this speaks to the overall issue of mental wellness for men in America. And I want to be clear, like, none of these things are bad things. Consent, empowerment, emotional intelligence, these are all good and we should want them in a partner. However, in these romance novels, we are seeing them inflated to such extremes that the relationships end up being codependent. And we start to romanticize codependent relationships. And to be further clear, I really enjoyed the books. I really liked the character of Rysand. I don't think it was written to be a foil to the modern man. And I think it's important to be able to still enjoy things while making observation and critiques. If you enjoyed this type of content, please make sure to subscribe and drop a like. Comment what your thoughts are. I'm really curious. I also post pretty much daily on TikTok, so follow there for more book content, and I'll see you soon.
Don't you want more than some fake boyfriend? Don't you want to be happy?